A warm welcome to Eye on Africa. I'm Rochelle Ferguson-Biahi with the top stories on the continent. Sport and culture meet in a spirit of solidarity. This is the 8th edition of the Francophone Games. Kicks off in Abidjan, Ivory Coast. Tensions, though, are high amid fresh violence in the economic capital. More than 6 million Somalians are in desperate need of humanitarian assistance. One region that's been particularly hard hit is the autonomous Somaliland. Our correspondents report from the region. And when it comes to beer consumption on the African continent, Nigeria takes second place. The country's beer industry is booming, with local beverages starting to dominate the market. We begin in Ivory Coast economic capital, Abidjan, where the 8th edition of the Francophone Games kicked off with a lively opening ceremony tonight. Over the next 10 days, 4,000 athletes and artists from 53 French-speaking nations will go head-to-head. The Games, though, open under tight security. An attack by gunmen left one security officer dead just hours before the international sporting event began. Well, France 24 and our sister channels are partners of the Francophone Games. Our correspondent spoke to athletes ahead of that colourful opening ceremony.
With just a few hours until the opening ceremony of the Francophone Games, participating athletes from 53 countries are getting ready at the Olympic Village. Warm-ups and stretches are in full swing. Tobias Meyer, Switzerland's number 2 in judo, is getting one last match in with his coach.
We try to get ready as best we can. We would have liked to do it on a judo mat, but it hasn't been installed yet. I heard it was delayed at customs, but we may do.
I have a small problem. I don't speak French that well.
It's fine. This is where people learn French too.
Laughing off the stress before the Games. Starting tomorrow, 10 sports and 12 cultural competitions will kick off. Despite the friendly atmosphere, each team has the same goal, to bring as many medals home as possible.
We fear no one, not France, not Canada. Are you saying you're the best? Yes, we are the best. Thank you.
For some, a good massage is all it takes to recover from a long trip, to loosen up tight muscles.
We get them ready for the competition. If there's anything bothering them, I try to help them with that.
Behind the scenes, security forces are in position to ensure the safety of over 4,000 athletes and artists. A few hours before the start of the ceremony, the surrounding areas of the stadium were completely closed off. The military and ambulances are on standby as more reinforcements continue to arrive to protect the 20,000 people expected tonight.
The idea is to manage the crowds as well as possible and be ready for anything, for someone fainting or feeling unwell, that sort of things.
Despite tension in the country, everyone here is rooting for the Games to run smoothly so the best team wins.
Well, time to bring you a brief look at some other stories making headlines on the continent. Kenya's President Uhuru Kenyatta held a rally in Nairobi ahead of elections scheduled for August the 8th. The contest between Kenyatta and the country's opposition leader Raila Odinga is expected to be among the closest that Kenya's seen in years. Well, this will be the 4th time Mr Odinga runs for president. He was beaten by Kenyatta in elections back in 2013. Mauritania's President Mohamed Ould Abdelaziz has kicked off campaigning for a referendum on proposed constitutional changes. More than 1.4 million Mauritanians are eligible to vote yes or no to reforms, which include abolishing the country's Senate and changing the national flag. Well, the opposition has vowed to boycott the referendum, calling it a pretext to keep the ruling party in power. And Nigeria's army has blamed a botched airstrike for the killings of 112 people at a camp for displaced people earlier this year. Military jets accidentally targeted the camp in Ran, northeast Nigeria in January because the site wasn't marked on its maps. An inquiry found that the military mistook people gathering in the area for Boko Haram insurgents. Next, the UN is calling it the biggest humanitarian crisis in decades. More than 6 million people in Somalia are in desperate need of humanitarian assistance. An ongoing drought has driven the country to the brink of famine. One region that's been especially hard hit is the autonomous Somaliland. France 24's Nicolas Germain and Julie Dungelhoff sent us this report.
Much of Somaliland looks like this. The drought has lasted 3 years. Authorities say 80% of the livestock has died. People have left the driest areas and settled in camps where aid is delivered. Fadouma Abdullahi has lived on these windy plains for 2 months.
There was no rain in my area. The livestock had nothing to eat. The animals were hungry, they were weak, they couldn't move, and they died. The drought just went on and on.
In the camp, people receive about $100 a month from NGOs. It's transferred to their mobile phone.
In this region only, we are doing cash transfers for 770 families. And in this specific town we are in today, Yagori, we're doing 100 families. The need is much bigger. We have to do much more. We have to reach much more, but with that depends on how much money we can able to raise.
In Somaliland, the vast majority of families depend on livestock to make a living. Most of the animals are sold in the town of Burao.
The livestock market of Burao in Somaliland is one of the biggest in East Africa. Before the terrible drought this year, it used to be much busier. Because of the lack of rain, many animals have died. And as a result, the price of a goat, for example, has gone up by 20%.
The drought has crippled Somaliland's economy. The situation is compounded by the fact that Somaliland, which has been autonomous for nearly 3 decades, is not recognized internationally. This means it cannot access vital funds from major donors like the World Bank and the IMF.
Madagascar released a range of new banknotes this week. The biggest one, a 20,000 Ariary note worth about €6, is proving problematic. Madagascar's central bank says it wants to adapt money to real-life situations. 92% of the population, though, still lives below the poverty line. Gail Borgia reports.
This is what the new Malagasy banknotes released Monday look like. Warm colours, national symbols like vanilla, light cheese or zebu. At a first glance, reactions on the street seem to be quite positive.
It's beautiful. Design is typically from Madagascar.
This is very nice. It looks like euros.
This 20,000 Ariary banknote is almost impossible to find in the capital for the moment, but it is already controversial. For small business people, it will be problematic.
For example, if people buy small volumes, I won't take the big €6 note because it will be difficult to give change back.
It's already difficult to give change with a €3 note. With a €6 note, it will be even worse. It will be a mess in the bus.
Inflation, exchange rate frauds, economists too are worried about the possible negative consequences of the new big note.
The release of new big notes will boost all trafficking. Vanilla, precious stones, zebus, rosewood. Because with those new notes, you can carry bigger wads in smaller bags.
Malagasy Central Bank says new banknote release was decided to have a better control on money flow and help fighting frauds.
And finally, when it comes to beer consumption on the African continent, South Africa takes first place, closely followed by Nigeria. For now, beer accounts for just 16% of the alcohol consumed in Nigeria, but it's a steadily growing industry. Local beers are also starting to dominate the markets. France 24's Simon Harding has this report.
A local pub in the suburbs of Abuja. Most of these people are used to drinking foreign export beers, such as Amstel, Stella or even Guinness. But a new product has found its way on the market, a local brew called Gulda, and since its release, it's been a very popular beer.
And I taste it, and it tastes nice, and I get to know that it's produced, I'm sure of production or process of production, and I get to like the taste. I think I'll put my regular brand aside.
The beer company called Batteray started producing its own products in June and are hoping to produce 50,000 litres over the next 12 months. The brewery employs 4 people and is managed by the founders of the brand, who are all expats. Heineken and Jageo dominate the beer industry in Nigeria, but Batteray are trying to find their place on the market, which consumes over 1.6 billion litres of beer per year.
There's a growing demand in America and Europe for craft beers and craft ales, and that gives us our inspiration that the market can grow here. But actually being on the ground and having Nigerians taste their beer and say, wow, this is really great, we decided to go for it and try and build this first brewery here in Nigeria.
Nigeria is the second highest beer drinking nation in Africa, but it is still a long way behind the highest consumers, South Africa, who enjoy 3 times as many beers.
Well, there you are. You're very much up to date. Coming up next, more international headlines. Stay tuned. You're watching France 24.